Hi, folks. Welcome to Monday's iWrite Radio podcast, videocast. I've got Stuart Lockhead and Jimmy Hutton with me today.
Hi there.
There's really quite a lot to talk about today, but we've got three headings: Nicola's press conference, Brexit, and a piece by Will Hutton. And I think the arms and legs that will be grown out of those three headings will probably take us too long. But if we start with the press conference, not the most exciting press conference we've had.
No, I was disappointed. I thought it'd be more exciting.
Nothing spring out of it for you?
Well, look, she had some bad news on the increase in the infections to tell us about. I think I said in a note to you guys that she would be providing reassurance in the presser, which is exactly what she did. And she kind of stymied any kind of hard questions from the press, to be honest. What did she talk about? We heard that they've not... Right, she said we've got their 3-weekly review. Now, they see that becomes important this time round, simply because of the increased infections. There was a word that perhaps Lanarkshire might be added to the Glasgow, it's not a cluster now, but the Glasgow restrictions, because it's on the up. She did notify us that there were some in Lothian and some in Lanarkshire. What did it say? 12 in Lothian, 13 in Lothian and 19 in Lanarkshire. It's not enough to get too excited about it. So what else did you have to tell us about? I don't know. The restrictions might be changed. I'll leave it to you guys. What did you think about it?
Jimmy?
It was all about the numbers today, wasn't it? It's just, I think she had a wee swipe at COVID deniers, saying that they're dangerously uninformed. I'd say that she was being a bit too polite about that, but there we go. Bottom line, the virus is on its way back, and it's on its way back because people haven't been sticking to the restrictions. So, and the fact that it's on its way back in a younger demographic means nothing, because if those young people keep going out and mixing and catching it, at some point they'll give it to their parents or their grannies, and then they'll start bleeding when the older people start dropping down again.
I think what I took away from it is not the outright admitting that the economy is becoming more important, but I think it's fairly obvious the way she's talking about risk, etc. now. The messaging is different, but the message that she's trying to get out there is, we need to open the economy. The difference between Westminster is she's not threatening people with losing their jobs if they don't go back to the office.
Well, the problem with the economy, mate, is that the numbers, nobody can tell you what the numbers are meaning at the moment because they've never seen them before. The huge drop, I mean, I think we're looking at dropping off a cliff economically. Fact is, how difficult that proves to be, we'll know not till we're right slap bang in the middle of it. We'll know Ken till we decide, Westminster decides just how much liquidity they're going to create. Well, they've created 400 odd billion so far. Yeah, if the economy is as bad as it begins to look, how much will they go and create?
Well, they don't seem to be very keen on that. I mean, we've got the way they're insisting on the furlough coming to an end, and also the hints that even the minimum wage, which they were flagging up, this new giveaway chancellor was saying the minimum wage, we're going to make sure that's even bigger than before. Oh, big deal. But they're going to put a freeze on that, apparently. So we could be heading into more austerity.
I don't think there's any doubt at all that the brunt of this will be taken, as ever, by the poor. It might seep into the middle class to a certain extent, but the same people will pay for this as paid for the bank's meltdown. I mean, it's a Tory government in charge.
Well,
Sorry, Jimmy, go
No,
ahead.
I was just going to say, isn't it nice for the rich that share prices and property prices are quite so high at the moment? They're no seeing drops in their safety nets, but they're quite, frankly, I'd suggest they'll be quite willing to see everybody else's legs being cut for under them.
Aye.
And the safety nets for the poor will just get tossed in the bin.
Well, look what happens at the banking crisis. Who made a load of money? The rich got richer. We've already seen this crisis, but we've already seen the rich get richer with all their dodgy contracts for SME, PPE, sorry, and such like.
I was interested by that boy for the Telegraph. I have no idea why she bothered answering the question to him. He was basically saying, you can't run a country, you're not good enough to run the country. It was awful. I've no idea why the opinions of the Federation of Small Business on last week's programme for government had any place in a COVID briefing. If I was her, I would have told him to ram it and wouldn't have answered his question at all.
I think that's an attack line that we'll see more of. Why aren't the Scottish government doing more about it? And we'll just ignore the fact that they can't borrow money to do more about it. That has to come from the Westminster government.
She didn't get much of a question about Boris and his go back to the office mantra. However, she got a chance when she was asked by the P&G about salt and grit on the roads and how there wasn't going to be so much of it, and therefore would that affect people commuting to work? God, it was a backwards question just to find out if anyway, she took it and said, no, we want you to work from home, she says, absolutely clearly.
That's now the major pillar of difference between Westminster and Holyrood. She's quite happy to see people staying at home, and Boris wants everybody out in the streets buying hot dogs and coffees.
It's not going to work. I think that Jimmy pointed it out last week when I came up with Invest in Fife to describe it. You know, the world has changed and it's not going to go back because they've discovered thousands and thousands, if not millions of people have discovered they can work from home and be just as productive.
But the other side to that has been mentioned very briefly is the amount of money people are going to save by not commuting. Does not compute. But, you know, they're not going to be insisting on wage rises when they're saving $6,000 a year on a season ticket.
Aye.
You know, so maybe there is a hidden boost to the economy in that,
and like we said,
a boost to different sections of the economy.
Aye, and like we said last week, perhaps we do have the infrastructure that we need for this century already in place without tanning billions of pounds on nonsense like HS2 and an extra bloody lane on the M8.
Well, that HS2 start last week, that sounded awfully out of place to me. It seemed like
it's a very difficult,
at the wrong time.
It's a difficult decision to change until you know what the landscape of the new economy, shall we call it, will look like. And oven ready. I'm thinking about Brexit here.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
Shovel ready projects are all infrastructure projects of that kind. They're roads and bridges and railway lines and things like that. So if we don't need them, they're going to have to rethink their shovel-ready projects.
Aye, well, it's the last saviour of government with any ideas, isn't it? Build, build, build.
Well, houses have to be built, but then you have the question of where do you build them?
Well, it's what's called pot barrel politics, especially in America, you know. Well, we're going to spend the money in my constituency so I can get re-elected. You know, put in a big factory, build a new road.
Yeah.
You know.
But this government is about to go to no deal in order that they can subsidize the industries that they think are important. Very un-Tory, but that's one of the big reasons that they're having an argument just now about the Brexit stuff. It's because they want to be able to pump money into the areas that they consider the future industries.
Aye, but the problem is we're at that point. This government We're relying on the judgment of one man, and it's not even, it's an unelected official. He's decided what he thinks is important, where he thinks the money should be directed, and that he's been allowed to drive the entire country off a cliff on the basis of his opinion. And let's be honest, the guy's won a couple of campaigns, but he's also lost a few. He's not the genius that he thinks he is, and the entire country shouldn't be the basis of his punt, his bet.
Well, don't forget the underlying philosophy is disruption. And Bill, based on how well the rich have done from the banking collapse and now already the virus, they're quite happy to have disruption. You know, lorries stacked up at Dover, medicines not arriving, food shortages.
That's the point. The point at which Dominic Cummings will be thrown out of number 10 is when the rich aren't benefiting. And if you've read his blog pieces, his philosophy isn't about the rich benefiting. He is a disruptor, but that includes disrupting the rich. If that begins to happen, Dominic Cummings will learn to fly, and it will be out the top floor of Downing Street that he learns.
I don't think he'll care, mate. I think as long as he's got enough salted away, and clearly already has, then what does he care about what happens to the rest of us? He's pretty much a sociopath.
The other big news, talking about Dominic Cummings, is this apparent move by the Westminster government to, well, let's call it a power grab from an international treaty, shall we? Apparently they're about to put into law, UK law, laws that will override the agreement they already have on the Northern Ireland border when it comes to Brexit.
It's interesting that they're going to use this internal market bill, which is this is a power grab from the devolved parliaments as well. And it's a double attack when you think about it on Northern Ireland, because it's going to, they're going to, throw away an international treaty that they signed only in January, and also a treaty that includes a promise that they went into the December election with. So, I mean, what are the chances of another country signing a trade deal with the UK that just seems to be run by a mafia gang that doesn't even keep its international treaties?
I don't know if it's just posturing. I think part of me thinks that the whole thing's just posturing, but the way that they intend to use the internal market is a worry for me. So if they're dragging Brexit together with this internal market legislation, I don't think, maybe it isn't posturing, you know, maybe this is their resetting of the United Kingdom. I think their contention will be that it strengthens the union, but the intention is to legislate Scotland into England. That's what this internal market is all about, to make Scotland part of England.
Well, I have to say, this came as a surprise to me. I didn't think they would do anything quite so blatant. I think the posturing of it might be simply to put pressure on the EU at the next round of talks, which starts tomorrow. In fact, I found out yesterday, for the Brexit talks, this is. And I'm wondering if it's just a way to leverage Barnier's team into giving up, well, not giving up, more allowing the UK not to give up anything more. And I can't see it working. I think somewhere deep in the bowels of Westminster, in a cupboard in the room Dominic Cummings uses, there's an evil witch coming up with these ideas. And has mind control over them, because to basically trash an international treaty within weeks, months of it being signed, is right out of Donald Trump's playbook.
Aye, exactly. And if they're going to follow through on this, effectively every piece of negotiation about Brexit since the referendum has been for nothing. We're exactly back at stage one. the problem being we're at stage 1 with a few weeks to go. I mean, even Boris saying October the 15th, that's just dick waving as well, because Barney had already said that everything had to be signed and sealed by the end of October. So Boris has knocked a couple of weeks off that to say, you'll go with my timeline, no yours.
You're right there. Here's a thought, guys. I mean, it sets a precedent. If this UK government is prepared to throw away an international treaty, can a future independent, potentially independent Scotland, throw away the Treaty of Union?
Yes, I think we should throw away the Treaty of Union now. I think what they've shown is that they have no regard for treaty, no regard for their word, no regard for anything that they've signed. So why should we show them any respect whatsoever with regards to a 313-year-old treaty that we think, or that the majority of Scotland thinks, is detrimental to Scotland?
Well, I mean, I'm a bit surprised. We're surprised. You know, when you think about it, they lied to us about the vow.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we surprised? Well, the vow, the EU, you know.
Why are we surprised that a man who has never, ever had any regard for honesty or integrity in his entire life, why are we surprised that he's willing to trash?
But Jimmy,
and by the way, he doesn't trust Europeans anyway. He doesn't even like them. So he's quite happy to toss them all in the bin, and whatever he said to them doesn't matter to him.
But for me, what it highlights is this is the Tory way. Cameron, May, and Johnson, they've all totally ignored what they promised Scotland. I mean, it took Cameron a matter of hours till he stepped out of Downing Street and announced evil. So Johnson just seems to be the worst of the bunch at the moment.
I wouldn't even say he's the worst of the bunch, mate. When you look back over the years, the worst of the bunch are actually the apologists for them that take positions in Scotland and try and justify the way that they act towards our country. I mean, your likes of your Ruth Davidsons, your Douglas Rosses, and gone way, way back, your Ian Langs and your Malcolm Rifkin. Malcolm Rifkin was a nice guy. He genuinely was, but he was perfectly happy to be an apologist for Margaret Thatcher, who absolutely chose to decimate Scotland because she knew that the Scots would never vote for her.
And then take the oil money to make it look like she hadn't decimated the whole UK.
Mm-hmm.
The other worry for me in all this is the big picture, which is we are definitely going to end up as the 51st state of the USA.
Well, I don't say. Okay, I'll let you carry on. Sorry.
Well, I mean, my view is if they renege on this treaty with the EU, or we go out with no deal, we need a big brother to hide behind. And the only one left is the USA. If Trump gets back in,
well, that's the thing.
What does that make us look like?
If Biden gets in with his historical support of the Irish and the leader of the committee that's in charge that will be negotiating any trade agreement with the UK in Congress, he's also pro-Irish. They've got a real problem with negotiating a deal if Trump doesn't win.
Yeah, you didn't get a trade deal, mate. What you get is a set of negotiations that will take 5 to 10 years, like any normal trade deal.
Unless it's Trump, in which case there will be a quick trade deal to placate Boris and his Tories, and we will lose everything in that trade deal. The only thing we'll get is the speed of the deal. Everything, GM crops, chlorinated chicken, will have an obligation for nukes, you name it. America will get absolutely everything they want, just as though they were a federal government and we were a state.
Well, the deal will be whatever America dictates, and the payoff will be to those who sign it. The payoff will be to the likes of a few trade negotiators and a few cabinet ministers. They'll be bought off the way that Scotland was bought off in 1707. And it'll probably be a worse deal than Scotland signed back then.
Sure.
I was just thinking, I mean, we've had a situation ever since we've had our so-called independent nuclear deterrent, which actually cannot be used unless the Americans turn the key first. So, and you think how big and important that was. It's less so now because the Cold War isn't with us anymore, but for most of my lifetime, we were already under the thumb of the Americans.
I think actually that this century will prove to be the undoing of the Americans. I think the 20th century will be seen, when we're long gone, as an era of the American empire. But I think Trump's absolutely destroyed that, because even if he is only a one-term president, I don't think the NATO alliance and Western European nations will ever trust Americans in a way that they have previously ever again, because there's always a chance that the Americans will elect somebody even worse than Donald Trump at some point.
Is that possible?
Yes, it is.
Oh God, you only need to look at some of Trump's supporters, mate, and some of the young team floating up underneath them. Aye, there is worse out there. It might not happen for the next few years, but seriously, I think Europe minus Britain is going to continue to forge its own way. And if that means that there's a European army to defend themselves from Russia, so be it. But the problem is, I don't think there's ever going to be a military threat from Russia. The threat from Russia, and it's not an economic threat either, because the Russian economy is pretty weak. The threat for Russia is that they don't trust the Germans. They never have and they never will. So at some point they need, and Putin is a typical Russian, at some point he will try to ensure that Ukraine and Belarus and the Baltic states come under his influence again, rather than the influence of the Germans.
Interesting point, Jimmy.
Well, I mean, it's one of the reasons Germany's building windmills everywhere, isn't it? So they don't have to import gas from Russia, although they're building a new pipeline.
I'd be interested. That's the big thing with the Germans, mate. If you had quite a less nationalistic Russian leader, there's a possibility that they could work together. The only problem is you've got 150 years of recent history that says the Germans and Russians can never work together. My God, if they worked together, Europe would be the world's powerhouse, not America.
Well, that's interesting. Putin will last forever.
Yeah, I mean, but America is still unique in the sense of it's built entirely on immigrants from all over the world, although largely white, I must admit.
Have they killed all the Native Americans?
Again, when you look at America, instead of getting involved in the last century European warfare, if America had concentrated on building up the Americas, building up Canada and building up the countries to its south, they probably would have done a far better job for themselves and for their own people. But they didn't they see, again, like the Russians, they see their neighbours as a threat. I don't know, maybe it's just a natural thing for countries not to trust the people around about them, but
maybe what we should be doing is expanding the European Union to Canada, Brazil, Argentina, and just surround America.
There's a possibility there. I think you arrange this phone call every show. Nori, this is getting down to sounding like you want it.
My wife decided to go for a walk. Her job is phone answering during the show.
Right. I thought it was somebody for Tufton Street maybe phoning them to tell him he's not been right wing enough today, Stuart.
My MI5 handler, actually, boys. The other thing that I think caught all of us was Will Hutton in The Guardian yesterday.
Yes.
Well, not The Guardian, The Observer.
Mm-hmm.
His piece about, well, it was Labour in Scotland was the hook he hung it on. It was very disappointing. I've got a lot of time for Will Hutton.
Well, that's exactly what I said myself.
When it comes to Scottish politics, he is clueless.
I mean, that's the point. He's not unique. And yet here was a man that, generally speaking, over the years I've respected. because he was, you know, it's like Steve Richards, another one that's old timer really, would pop up on things like the Parliament channel and do a serious thing about the situation of politics in London. And Will Hutton has been that man as well. And then he's just, oh, it's a trope. It's it's a bit of Union Jackery. He seems to imagine that if you back Richard Leonard or the Labour Party could save the Union in Scotland. Sorry, that's really what it adds up to. And it's a load of rubbish.
It just, again, it comes for that area of not knowing Scotland. And even if you do know Scotland, you're taking your cues for Labour in Scotland, who still don't understand that the voters aren't going to go back to Labour. They're just not. They feel that Labour's left them behind. They feel that Tony Blair's Labour government let them down. And every single time they change their Scottish leader and change their direction, thinking that they can win back their voters, whilst ignoring the huge elephant in the room, and that now over half of Scotland's people want Scotland to be independent. And Labour's only answer to that is, no, you can't be independent, you can't even have a vote on it. So at that point, they lost some voters to the Tories, because at least the Tories are honest in their British nationalism. But they lost most of their voters to the SNP, quite simply because people look at the SNP and see people who want to run their country for the good of their country, as opposed to the good of their party.
It was interesting, I think, was it on Bella Caledonia, we got the article from Simon Brooke, Saving the Union, maybe no. And I'll just quote his final paragraph. In summary, each and every one of Will Hutton's reasons for Scotland to stay within the Union is clearly understood in Scotland as a very strong reason to leave the Union. Let me say this very gently to you, Will. Take yourself homeward and think again.
Yeah. These guys, London commentators, Rintoul's one of them as well, they seem to read the headlines. They don't seem to read the body of the text about this. And they just buy it hook, line and sinker. I mean, can they not afford the train fare to come up for a week?
I think more than a week for them land, I think.
It's also this complete disregard for the last 13 years. I mean, the SNP have won every election in Scotland since 2007. And God knows we've had enough of them with the amount of general elections that got thrown in over the last few years. And they've won every one of them. And still the London commentariat doesn't get that Scotland's changed. Labour's never coming back. And putting a Tony Blair light in London to lead the Labour Party, and as I say, changing every couple of years up here, isn't he going to change that? I mean, do they really think that the Scottish people are only voting SNP so we can wave a blue flag, stick a bit of blue paint on our face and stick the Vickies up at London? We're voting SNP because we want our country to be away from London.
I think summing up the Labour Party is not only has the SNP stolen their clothes, they've actually now owned the shop that they bought the clothes out of. I mean, there is nothing that Labour's saying that the SNP aren't doing. I mean, if you watch FMQs, a number of times the bouncy idiot gets up, Richard Leonard gets up and says, oh, and you need to make cars drive forward. And Nicola Sturgeon says, well, actually, we've got that in progress at the moment, and we'll be reporting on that in 2 weeks.
I mean, this is why you
can't keep up to date.
This is why the likes of Ian Murray gets away with. They love him there because he still talks the same rubbish that they want to hear. I mean, Will Hutton suggesting that one of the reasons why Scotland should stay is about the Edinburgh military tattoo, the open golf.
Because, guys, you and I know as soon as the military tattoo gets filled in on the calendar, we start making arrangements to go up there.
Absolutely.
I've been at the Edinburgh military tattoo because I got free tickets.
I think I've been twice.
See it? No.
I think I've been twice in 52 years, mate. And it's this thing. I seen a stat the other day, and I must go and try and check it somewhere. Somebody was babbling on about the British Army and how we need the strength of the British Army to back us and that. And the whole wrap themselves in the butcher's apron nonsense. But I couldn't believe this stat's right, and I need to try and check it. But somebody quoted a figure of 28% of all service personnel in the British Army, Navy and Air Force are Scots. I can't believe that that's right, but I would imagine that the figure is a lot bigger than our 8.4% of the population.
That'll be interesting if we get our independence.
Aye.
We've got a bigger army than you.
Aye, but a large part of your army wants to leave and join ours.
That actually, somebody brought that up years ago. What happens to a Scottish squaddy in the British Army? And as was pointed out to them, half the SAS are either Australian or New Zealanders, and the other half are from Africa.
Let's be honest, mate. I always remember there were a lot of Scottish guys joined the parachute regiment in the Marines. They went for the elite regiments because it was tougher, it was harder, and they wanted to be a part of those regiments for a reason. I'll take a battalion of paras, 3 of their frigates, maybe half a dozen of their F-35s just to really annoy them, because that's probably about as many as they've got that actually work. And that'll do us.
Are you going to let them keep all their admirals?
They can have as many admirals as they want, mate. Aye, because I think
3 admirals for every boat.
I think they're about as much use as Admiral car insurance, probably, mate.
Oh,
did you see?
Good one.
All right. Did you see, Jimmy, that my favourite, not favourite, let's be honest, Stuart MacDonald, MP,
Aye. Oh.
who signs up to everything Israel wants, who's practically pro nuke, pro Trident, even though he's not allowed to. He was designing our Scottish Royal Navy. I think he called it. Did he call it the Royal Scottish Navy even?
He might very well have done, mate.
Did that include 3 frigates and half the paras?
I didn't think it did, mate. But seriously, the amount of boats that the Royal Navy have got sitting down in Portsmouth and what have you in Southampton at the moment that are sitting waiting for engines that actually work, because they bought all these engines for Rolls-Royce to buy British, and they're absolutely pants. The engines didn't work. They should have chucked the bloody Lockheed Martin nonsense that the Yanks used.
Yeah, I remember a bit about that. I think the Scottish Navy should consist purely and simply of the fastest, biggest speedboats you can get. Because when we're running our drugs into England in order to pay off our huge debts, we need to be able to outrun their boats that haven't got engines that work.
At that point, you could do it on pedals, mate.
You know, as far as I'm aware, I believe that some of the biggest, most efficient engines that go in ships are actually built in Switzerland, strangely enough, and they don't even have a coast.
Well, the Yanks offered us, for the Type 23s and 35s, mate, the Yanks offered us stuff that they had proven. You know what I mean? It had been running, they'd run 1 million miles round the planet, engines that had been proven for 10 years, and we went, no, we'll go with Rolls-Royce because they're the world's experts. The world's experts in something, but it isn't boat engines.
We should maybe not talk too loudly about boat engines, lads. We're still waiting on these ferries getting put in the water.
Aye, and let's be honest, our record with paddle steamers isn't great of late either, is it?
No. Anything else that popped up on your radar today, lads?
Quite the day.
Ruth Wishart wrote a piece in the...
Aye, that was quite an interesting piece. I like that.
What was she on about? Remind me.
What
was it again, Jimmy? I've forgotten.
Oh, me and all.
This franchise.
Aye. She was having a pop at Andrew Neil, and actually it was quite nice because she sort of gently savaged Andrew Neil, but mostly using his own words, which I quite enjoyed.
Oh yes, she did have an excellent piece that I've used before, and because people forget, talking about the civil service role is to support the elected government on the day and implement its policies. Now, sometimes I get arguments about that, but basically the civil service will work.
Guys, I'm going to have to go. Sorry, I just quit this, but I've got to go. I'll speak to you later on.
All right, cheers.
The civil service, it's their duty to support the union. And she's got the quote here. While the referendum is politically contentious, it is correct that civil servants carry out their duties on this issue as they would any other government policy. This applies equally to policy and media work, including social media. In other words, the civil servants have got to support the union.
Yeah, but we knew that.
And they awarded, give them medals after the 2014 referendum as well.
They awarded the medals for producing inaccurate figures.
Exactly.
Which is slightly different to supporting government policy. No, it's definitely ramping up. Wings had a piece from Kenny McCaskill. He seems to be doing a lot on Wings at the moment, asking for the yes groups to come together and start preparing for a second referendum. I think that's a bit premature, but
I saw that, and I was seeing that. I saw it today. It was on Wings too, but I was looking for Peter Bell's. I thought Peter Bell had a piece on Kenny McCaskill, which but I couldn't find it in time for today's show, so maybe I'll find it later. There is movement. I mean, there's movement of some sort. Whether it's movement, there's still a divide between those people that really support Wings, that are desperate for a referendum now. You've got.
I don't think that matters. I think the day they call a referendum, that goes away. I can't even. In all honesty, I think Wings will pull his horns in when it comes to fighting a referendum.
A bit like Peter Bell, who
he'll change his tact and start attacking the opposition rather than.
He's criticising the senior running of people running the SNP, but he said he's still 2 votes to the SNP come next year's election, and they're the only party that can take us to independence.
Well, I agree with quite a lot of what Wings says, but I part company with him there. I'm still not. At the moment, both votes will be SNP unless a party with a genuine policy platform comes forward.
It also needs to have a genuine chance of actually doing, achieving more.
That's what I mean. And I think the big question is who leads it.
I'll tell you what I'm interested in.
We're so near now, they need a face to lead it.
Well, let's talk about, what about a leader for the campaign who's not Nicola Sturgeon, because even if Nicola Sturgeon stays as the main figurehead for the let's say a campaign for independence, they're going to need somebody else to sort of hold that. Well, okay, what I'm trying to get to is...
Yeah, I know what you're trying to get to.
What Kenny McCaskill was saying, that they need to find they need to have a steering committee, I think, and I think that's what he was criticised for. And suddenly it passed through my mind what we needed to get over the line when we were setting up the radio station was a project management team.
Yeah, and the obvious choice for that has been stymied, because the obvious choice for that was Alex Salmond.
Well, there you go. Yes, I mean he had the charisma and the energy to support
and the drive.
And the drive to get all the people behind him. Yeah, no, he made a huge difference.
So I'm not sure he would have been the right person, by the way. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know. Nobody springs to mind immediately that isn't a politician already in the SNP.
Yeah, Alex Salmond bothered to tweet something. I think it was yesterday, and it was somebody that he had on his TV show. And so I had a look at it. I thought, he doesn't say very much on social media. It must be important. I can't even remember what it was about. It was so not important.
Well, I think we'll wind things up today, Stuart.
Yep.
Thanks for being on, Stuart Lockhead.
Yeah.
Jimmy has no doubt run away to Like
other duties.
A cup of tea for his dad, probably. And I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks. We'll catch up with you tomorrow. I've got a feeling there might be a bit more Brexit to talk about tomorrow, and that'll be coming on the agenda again.
The inquiry should be sitting again at Holyrood, the one into the Salmond affair.
Now that we've mentioned him by name.
And so that's Holyrood back. And imagine will be the fallout from this Brexit, this plan to abandon the treaty, the Northern Ireland Protocols Treaty. So that'll all be going. Well, we could be busy tomorrow.
I do think we need to have a day on Brexit at some point, because this is the last leg of the negotiations, whatever happens. Okay, folks, thank you for listening. As I say, thanks for being on, Stuart. And we'll catch you up tomorrow. Cheers for now.